The UN General Assembly's overwhelmingly voted for raising the Palestinian flag at the UN headquarters.
A recorded vote has been requested. We shall now begin the voting process. Those in favor of draft resolution A/69/L87 revision/1, please signify. Those against? Abstentions.
The voting has been completed. Please lock the machine.
The Palestinian proposed resolution was opposed by the U.S. and Israel, among others, while most of the EU nations abstained. The outcome was fiercely criticized by the Israeli ambassador to the UN, who described it as a surrender of the UN principles. However, the Palestinian envoy hailed it as a step toward the recognition of Palestine as a full UN member.
Today's vote is a reaffirmation of the legitimacy of the national aspirations of the Palestinian people, of their existence among the nations of the world, and their right to self-determination, to be a free people in control of their lives and destiny in their own independent state. The General Assembly's adoption of this resolution will help to restore some hope to our people and leadership to fulfill the rights of the Palestinian people, achieve a just and sustainable peace, and secure Palestine's rightful place among the community of nations.
I believe this is a defeat for the Israeli occupation. This is a defeat for the Israeli government program of settlements and dictation rather than peace and negotiations. This is a victory for peace. This is a victory for the two-state solution. This is a victory for stability in the region. We urge the international community to continue working in order to end the Israeli occupation and to have the establishment of a Palestinian state with full sovereignty, full independence, because this is the way to defeat extremism, instability, and injustice in this region.
Pope Francis met Israel's President Reuven Rivlin in the Vatican on Thursday. A statement issued afterwards by the Holy See's press office said the talks covered the need and the urgency to promote a climate of trust between Israelis and Palestinians and to restart direct negotiations to reach an accord that respects the legitimate aspirations of the two peoples as a fundamental contribution to peace and stability in the region.
Very good. I want to say here in 10 Downing Street, reaffirm again that I am ready to resume direct negotiations with the Palestinians with no conditions whatsoever to enter negotiations, and I'm willing to do so immediately.
There's a lot to talk about today. There's the close relationship between Britain and Israel. There's the growing economic and commercial ties between our countries. There's also some enormously important global threats to discuss, particularly the threat of Islamist extremism, most notably from ISIL in Syria and Iraq. So we'll be discussing all those things. Britain remains staunch in our defence of Israel's right to exist and right to defend itself. We also remain thoroughly committed to the two-state solution and the peace process, which we'll also discuss today. But it's great to welcome you here on this visit.
That I believe with all my heart that the Lord's return draws ever so nigh. And as Luke 21:28 records, Jesus says, when you see these things begin to come to pass, look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption, not destruction, put that in your hip pocket for a moment, your redemption draws nigh. Okay, kindly allow me to share with you why it is that many, like myself, have come to this conclusion, that the rapture is imminent and even closer than any of us might think. First, I still hold to the belief that the rapture of the church will take place prior to to the fulfillment of the prophecy in Ezekiel 38 and 39. Now, in the past, we have gone into great detail, in depth, into this. I do want to revisit this. The reason I believe that it happens before Ezekiel 38 is because of scriptures like 1 Thessalonians 5:3, Daniel 9:27, and Ezekiel 38:11 in that order, among others, but those chiefly. I'd like to, if you'll allow me, just read them quickly, starting with 1 Thessalonians 5:3. I know you know this. While people are saying, there is peace and security, then sudden destruction will come upon them as labor pains come upon a pregnant woman, and they will not escape. Daniel 9:27. Then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. That's a period of 7 years. But in the middle of the 7 years, he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering, and on the wing of abominations shall be the one who makes desolate, known as the abomination that causes desolation, even until the consummation which is determined is poured out on the desolate. Now, Ezekiel 38:11. And we'll tie these together. Hang in there. You will say, this is God through the prophet Ezekiel speaking to this alliance of nations that will come against Israel and launch a nuclear attack. Listen. I will go up, this is the alliance, against a land of unwalled villages. Key. I will go to a peaceful people who dwell safely, might I say, in peace and security. All of them dwelling without walls, and look at this detail, and having neither bars nor gates. Okay. Let's connect the prophetic dots. First, sudden destruction comes upon them while they are saying peace and security. I believe that subsequent to this sudden destruction, there will be the 7-year peace agreement of Daniel 9:27 via Hitler's repackaged final solution, which is now called the two-state solution, also known as Islamic Jihad's only solution. It's Hitler repackaged. It's the annihilation of the Jewish nation repackaged, reinvented. Call it what you want. It comes from the pit of hell, from Satan himself. And it's been happening since the beginning of time. When Satan, demon-possessed, Cain to murder Abel, thinking that he could annihilate the race, the seed that would come, the seed of the woman, the virgin birth of the Messiah, the Savior, who would redeem mankind. This is why Satan, from the beginning of time, has sought to annihilate and exterminate the Jewish people, because the Messiah comes from the Jewish people. It's the proto-evangelicum, as it's called, Genesis 3:15, that the seed of the woman would crush the serpent's head. See, Satan is not all-knowing. He does not know everything. He does not know that the seed was not going to come from Abel, it was going to come from Seth. Fast forward. Get to Egypt in the Exodus. And Pharaoh is demon-possessed by Satan himself to have every Hebrew male child thrown into the Nile River to their certain death, to annihilate the Hebrew people, from which would come the Messiah, the Savior of the world. Fast forward to the book of Esther. Haman, demon-possessed, gets the king to issue an edict, irreversible, to annihilate all of the Hebrew people there in the Persian kingdom. Fast forward to Herod in the New Testament. Has every single male Jewish child slaughtered and butchered because there's a king that would be born. Then fast forward to Hitler and everything in between, by the way. Demon-possessed to annihilate, exterminate, eliminate the Jewish people. And this satanic effort, call it what you want, is alive and well today. Here's the thing. If Satan, theoretically, it's impossible, but if theoretically he could have succeeded in the Old Testament to eliminate the Jewish people, he could have thwarted the Messiah coming the first time. When he failed, now he's going to try to thwart the Messiah coming the second time. Do you know that at the end of the tribulation, Israel will call out for their Messiah? Now think this through. If there's no Israel, there's no calling out for their Messiah. Here's the thing, and you've heard it said before. The purpose of the tribulation is for the salvation of the Jewish nation, and the whole house of Israel will be saved at the end of the 7-year tribulation. It's the time of Jacob's trouble, not the church's trouble. I mean, that alone, standalone, should seal the deal on the doctrinal truth, sound doctrine of the pre-tribulation rapture. It's the 70th week of Daniel. It's the time of Jacob's trouble. When the time of the Gentiles is complete and that last Gentile gets saved, the trumpet sounds and we're out of here. I can't wait, Lord Jesus, come quickly. And then God shifts all of his attention to his people, the Jewish people, for the last 7 years of human history as we know it. And at the midpoint, where in Daniel 9:27, the Antichrist commits the abomination that causes desolation, the Jews will realize this is not our Messiah. This is a false Messiah. And they will flee, I believe, to Petra in modern-day Jordan, where for the last 3.5 years, God will protect Israel, his people. And at the end of the 7 years, they will call for their Messiah, whom they wounded and pierced. And he will come. It's been said that the rapture is when Jesus comes for us, and the second coming is when Jesus comes with us, his bride by his side, 10,000s by his side. Now, there's this sudden destruction that comes while they're saying peace and security. This sudden destruction will cause the whole world to want peace and security. Enter the 7-year peace agreement. And then finally, Israel believes we finally have peace. Now, here's the thing. They're going to be allowed to rebuild their temple. The temple has to be built in the first 3.5 years of the 7-year tribulation. Otherwise, the abomination that causes desolation can't take place by the Antichrist in the temple. So I'm of the belief that they will dwell securely, confidently. They'll finally have peace. They want peace. Ask any Israeli. You can ask them when we go. Those of you who are going. Those of you who aren't going, we'll ask them for you. They want peace. They'll do anything for peace. They'll give up anything for peace. Israel will let her guard down and literally dismantle and take down her walls, the walls that were erected during the Intifada in the year 2000 with the gates. Remember those of you who went with us in 2010 and in 2008? Those walls around Bethlehem and Ramallah and Jericho to protect the Jews. And they're made of concrete and bars and gates. We went through in 2008. We didn't go in 2010. Too risky. We're not going this year either, by the way, into Bethlehem. That was kind of scary. No Jew can go in there. That's why you had to have an Arab bus driver, my people. I still didn't feel safe. We made it, though. I just talked pidgin, or at least tried, and might have worked. But they're going to dismantle those walls. They have their temple. They have a peace agreement. They have a 7-year peace agreement. Okay, well, how do I come up with and arrive at the conclusion that the rapture will happen before all of this? 5 words in 1 Thessalonians 5:3. 5 words. And they will not escape. What do you mean? The church is not the they. Can I say it that way? I just did. The church is the we. We who are alive and remain. They will not escape implies that there will be those who will. Who? We. Not they. We. What are you saying, Pastor? That the rapture comes in concert with this sudden destruction? Possibly. Possibly. It would sure explain a lot. You mean that when the sudden destruction comes, and it will come, and it is coming, because they are saying peace and security, are you saying that they will not escape, but we will escape by way of the rapture? Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Israeli Prime Minister's due in London today, but he might not get a very warm welcome, it seems. Protests over his visit are taking place. Artist Polly Boyker is following them for us.
Very angry. If you take a look at the placards, the flags, a lot of the anger here from the demonstrators is pointed towards the Israeli operation that took place in Gaza last year that resulted in the deaths of some 2,000 Palestinians, amongst them lots of women and children. Now, we spoke to some of the protesters gathered here outside Downing Street a little bit earlier. Let's take a listen to what they had to say.
We feel that the Israeli government is totally unfair to the Palestinians.
Netanyahu should not be allowed to come to this country, and I don't think he should be allowed to build on Palestinian property.
I have to say we've had some chaotic scenes here in Whitehall a little bit earlier on. It's hard to say just how many people have gathered here, probably around 1,000 at some point, and there's been somewhat of a counter demonstration as well, because there have been a smaller number of pro-Israeli supporters, and there have been clashes. There have been a couple of arrests that have taken place, and the police were having trouble controlling the crowds here, keeping a lid on it. We've just had the units of police come and push the crowds to either side of the road, because at some point they were simply stopping traffic here in the middle of London. Now, just to give you an idea of the strength of feeling about this official visit here in the UK, well, some 100,000 signatures on a petition calling for Benjamin Netanyahu to be arrested have appeared on a parliamentary website. Now, Parliament is obliged to consider debating this issue in Parliament once there are over 100,000 signatures on a petition like this. No word as yet as to whether that's going to happen. However, there's been criticism from other spheres as well. We've had some prominent union leaders, left-wing politicians write an open letter in The Guardian calling for Benjamin Netanyahu to face, to be arrested for war crimes and to face sanctions from the UK rather than the warm political welcome that he's going to get. He's set to meet with the Prime Minister tomorrow. So a bit of a two-tiered welcome. On the one hand, a strong political ally, but on the other hand, a lot of anger from the British public on the streets of London as a result of this visit.
As you said, too, the anti-Netanyahu campaign's gained many supporters. But on the internet, there are numerous caricatures showing the Israeli Prime Minister as an evil dictator, indeed, and calling for him to be held accountable for his crimes. We spoke to Amina Salim from the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, who says Britain's support for Israel should be stopped immediately, she thinks.
The public support is absolutely fantastic. More and more people now, I mean, around the world, just, millions upon millions of people are waking up to what Israel is doing to the Palestinian people, to its ongoing theft of land, the settlement building, which is an act of war, its illegal acquisition of land. Last year's dreadful assault on Gaza will let the British government know as well that we do not agree with their policies towards Israel. This unconditional support for Israel, this welcoming of Netanyahu. And, we will shame the British government as well. And we will keep saying to the British government that what you need to do, rather than welcoming Netanyahu to our shores, is to impose immediate sanctions on Israel and an arms embargo on Israel.
Ido Netanyahu, the brother of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, served as a member of the Israeli Special Forces in the 1970s when Tel Aviv was engaged in many atrocities and human rights violations, and currently Ido works to promote Israel with his writings and theatrical pieces. Many students at City College of New York were very angry that the theater department selected his play, A Happy End, to be presented on the campus and invited him to address the audience afterward. Outside the performance, in the pouring rain, a crowd of students loudly denounced the presence of Ido Netanyahu on their campus.
Bringing people like Ido Netanyahu, who participated in the genocide against Palestinians, supports his brother in his endeavors in committing genocide, as well as says reactionary things such as Israel needs to attack Iran because Iran is a nuclear threat, even though Israel is the principal threat in the Middle East and to the peoples of the world.
Palestinian student Rawan Toom says the performance represents a double standard from the administration.
If I ever wanted someone who's had bad experiences in Palestine to come and speak on campus, they wouldn't allow that. But they allow a war criminal to come and speak on campus, and they allow a war criminal to come and have his show on campus. And I mean, where's the fairness in that?
City College and the wider City University of New York system has a history of preventing Palestine-related events from taking place, often because it is alleged to make Jewish students uncomfortable. Rawan says the welcoming of Ido Netanyahu sends a hostile message to the Palestinian and Islamic students.
Turn now overseas to that growing humanitarian crisis. Hundreds of thousands of refugees fleeing brutal violence in the Middle East, rushing across European borders. Germany opening its doors, welcoming nearly 20,000 refugees this weekend alone. And tonight, pressure growing on the United States.
Confrontations today in Hungary between police and refugees. And in Greece, the waves of people keep on coming.
It's on biblical portions. You know, the people are coming quicker than we can load them.
More than 20,000 arriving in Germany in the past 3 days. Big smiles as they're warmly welcomed. Chancellor Angela Merkel says Germany is ready to take in 800,000 people this year and has urged other European countries to step up.
The White House now says the United States is preparing to accept at least 10,000 Syrian refugees in the coming budget year, which begins October 1st and ends September 30th, 2016. The U.S. has taken in about 1,500 Syrians since civil war broke out there more than 4 years ago.
White House spokesman Josh Earnest says President Obama has decided that admitting more Syrian refugees would help boost the U.S. response to the humanitarian crisis in Europe.
The president has directed his team to consider how we can further scale up our response. One thing that the United States can do is to begin to admit more Syrian refugees into the United States.
Meanwhile, Franklin Graham is calling on President Obama to take action in the Middle East to help the Syrian refugees. Graham issued an open letter to the president on Facebook. He says the problem must be addressed quickly for the sake of the refugees and to prevent ISIS from infiltrating the West. Graham says world powers like the U.S. need to use their militaries to establish safe zones to protect refugees still in the region. He says, without action, I believe this crisis will only escalate. The long-term implications are great, with the possibility of ISIS infiltrating the refugees and bringing their terrorist activities onto our shores.
UNICEF has already warned that millions more refugees could flee Syria destined for the EU. The huge numbers are a challenge to security, with many arriving refusing to identify themselves upon arrival in Europe.
We are afraid about this print in Hungary. If they let us to going without printing, it's better. It's better because a lot of people going without print, and it's better for them and it's better for us.
And this is far from an isolated incident. Italian state figures indicate that of the 120,000 migrants that have arrived in Italy this year, 1 in 3 refuses to identify themselves by providing fingerprints and photos. That means there are over 40,000 unregistered migrants on the continent. Well, EU member states have difficulty dealing with the crowds of people appearing at their borders. Thousands are pushing their way towards Germany and Sweden through Hungary, Austria and Denmark. And rather than possess them themselves, some of the transit nations have opted to simply allow the migrants to proceed to their final destinations.
This taxi ferries families, in this case a Syrian family, for the last 10 kilometres to the Serbia-Hungary border from around 20 to 50 euro. The family says they'll show us how they're going to try and get across the border illegally. This is the last 3 kilometres. We're walking on foot along the railway lines. This is a Syrian family from Aleppo, 4-year-old Manissa and 1-year-old Rayan. Manissa's just started crying. It's pouring with rain. This is about the time that they start to cross, just as it's getting dark.
I want to get a Belgium without fingerprint.
And you don't know how to do it?
Yes, I don't know how to do it, but there's some smugglers taking money from people and get them to Belgium without fingerprint and to Germany without fingerprint.
This is the Serbia-Hungary border. Basically, this is where people enter the EU, and it's an extremely strange situation. Police are here. There's a gap in the 4-metre fence that Hungary's built to keep them out. People are walking through the border, and then some of them go on to legally into a camp, and then others just break off into the bushes and end up God knows where. No effort whatsoever is being made by the police, just letting through hundreds and hundreds in front of our eyes through to the EU. Let's ask them why. Guys, any control? Why no control?
Just can't. No. You can't.
Why not?
Because we are bosses. Okay. We can't.
Police basically refusing to speak to us, telling us that, you know, they haven't got their boss's approval. So we've just crossed the Serbia-Hungary border. The Camp O is about 100 metres over there. This group doesn't want to be fingerprinted. They're going to try and cross into Hungary and then onto Germany illegally.
The security breaches have raised concern about who is coming among the refugees. Some EU countries are worried that Islamic State fighters could appear among the new arrivals.
The Salafists are trying to use the desperate situation refugees find themselves in for their own goals. They are trying to talk with unaccompanied youths who have come to Germany without their families and who are in a particular need of support and connections.
The Danish Security and Intelligence Service is aware that among the refugees from Syria and Iraq could be people who sympathize with militant Islam and could consider acting on the encouragement of militant Islamic propaganda to carry out attacks against countries participating in the international coalition against Islamic State, including Denmark.
Well, anti-immigration rallies have swept through Germany, in some cases ending in clashes with rival activists. Germany is by far bearing the bulk of Europe's refugee crisis, accepting thousands of migrants almost daily, and that's triggering reaction from the country's right wing.
They allow people without papers, without anything, by the thousands to come into this country. It could be ISIS murderers, it could be criminals. It should be forbidden.
I just don't want the masses. We're having now masses of Muslims. It's not the Christians.
If we allow this to go on like this, what we will get, 2 million refugees or asylum migrants next year, 5 million the next year after.
Well, it's been a year since US President Barack Obama launched airstrikes against terrorist organization Islamic State. The US and its allies have carried out 6,700 strikes at a cost of nearly $4 billion this year. Some 10,000 ISIL targets, from vehicles to oil facilities, have been destroyed. However, the extremists have still been gaining influence and territory, spreading violence throughout the Middle East.
On this day, 1 year ago, President Obama launched the bombing campaign against ISIL.
Our coalition is on the offensive. ISIL is on the defensive, and ISIL is going to lose.
Since then, the territory that the Islamic State controls has grown. The number of fighters stayed about the same, according to U.S. officials. And those who were taken out were quickly replaced by new fighters joining the terrorist group from all over the world. So what has the U.S. done throughout the year other than bombing? It tried to find moderate rebels to train and discovered they're hard to find.
It turns out to be very hard to identify
people.
It airdropped weapons to quote-unquote allied anti-ISIL forces on the ground. Some of the weapons apparently landed right into the hands of ISIL. And to all questions related to Syria, U.S. officials gave a default answer. It's all Assad's fault.
The Assad regime, frankly, is the root of all evil here.
By now, we're all used to living with the war on terror. But at this point, I think war on terror has become a bit of a misnomer. Here's what I mean. Right now, one of the baddest bad guys we're fighting in the war on terror is ISIS, right? We all know this. All of our news keeps telling us to be real scared of them. But now they just released a video showing more than a dozen of their fighters undergoing weapons training. And just guess what weapons the bad guys were using. M16 rifles from America itself. Flashpoint Intelligence is a security firm that consults with NBC News, and they said that the video could be evidence that ISIS recently seized a new cache of American weapons. The firm said that's because the use of American rifles by ISIS is rare, so ISIS probably just scored the American weapons. So where'd they get them from? That's really hard to say, of course, especially when you consider that the U.S. has dumped literally hundreds of millions of dollars in military gear into Iraq. Last year, ISIS made another video bragging that they recovered weapons that the U.S. had just airdropped in. Those weapons were supposed to be for Kurdish fighters, but ISIS said they scooped them up. So that could be where they got the M16s. And of course, the U.S. continues to send more weapons and military hardware into the whole region all the time in the war on terror. And so much of that stuff ends up in the hands of the bad guys that we're supposed to be fighting. Like the 2,300 Humvees ISIS just scooped up in June. So while it's crazy that we're actually arming the bad guys in our war on terror, it's crazier that that is actually the norm. So this is the story we're told, right, over and over by our media and the government, that ISIS is a terrible bad guy that needs to be stopped, but that we keep arming them. We all keep hearing this over and over, that we are making the bad guy we're supposed to be fighting.
Another botched program at the Pentagon was just revealed by the Center for Disease Control, which discovered that a military lab accidentally shipped live cultures of potentially fatal plague bacteria.
The CDC has now confirmed that for the second time this year that one of the Pentagon's laboratories has apparently mislabeled, improperly stored, and accidentally shipped samples of potentially infectious plague bacteria and equine encephalitis. The Pentagon's most secure Army lab in Maryland is responsible for mishandling the specimens, which was likely a part of a bioterror pathogens research study. There has now been an emergency ban placed on all bioterror research. The Pentagon is still reeling from revelations that another lab in Utah had been mishandling anthrax for 10 years. That lab mistakenly shipped live anthrax to nearly 200 other labs in the U.S. and abroad. Officials say that there is no danger to the public, citing that the samples recovered from the lab appear to be weakened or dead specimens of the bacteria. However, the CDC has raised other concerns about the military's labs and their safe handling procedures of some other specimens created as bioterror pathogens, such as Venezuelan equine encephalitis virus and the Eastern counterpart, which, when combined, can cause rare but serious illnesses in people, including deadly inflammation of the brain. The bacteria now in question causes various strains of potentially fatal plagues, such as the bubonic plague and the Black Death, which killed about half of the entire European population during the 14th century. Today, most of the plague can be treated with antibiotics, but it can still kill about 11% of those infected. According to the CDC, around 8 people contract the plague in the U.S. every single year. At least 2 adults have died so far in the U.S. this year from the plague alone.
We are on a high alert because this vaccine-derived poliovirus type 2 in question has been circulating in the region. It means we're dealing with an international alert, and we must do everything we can to stop the spread of this virus that can lead to paralysis, even death for children. So it's very simple. We must organize vaccination campaigns to immunize children to stop the spread of the virus. There is now a certain urgency because this is something that has never occurred in Mali before. This is the first time this type of virus has been found here. There have been cases in Africa, specifically in Madagascar and Niger, but it's the first time Mali has observed a case of poliovirus.
That nationwide salmonella outbreak. People in at least 30 states have been sickened by contaminated cucumbers. 2 deaths are linked to the outbreaks, and ABC's Dr. Richard Besser is here. Thank you for being here, Rich. So this is really serious. This is large.
Yeah, this is really big. 30 states, 2 people died, more than 300 people sick. But it's even bigger than that. CDC tells me for every case that's reported, there's as many as 29 that weren't. So there may have been as many as 10,000 people sickened. And the reason is where our food comes from. 50% of our fruit, 20% of our vegetables are imported, and they tend to come from the same place at the same time. So one farm in Mexico can lead to an outbreak across the entire nation.
I called my mama's phone. I did everything I could. No answer. But I knew she was gone because there would have been no other place in the world she would have been.
And my husband, Ron Kirby, was killed by a man who was diagnosed with schizophrenia. He sent his girlfriend to buy the gun.
I don't want to have to say, I forgive you for killing my mother. I don't want to have to say that. And I know that the process will have to take place, and there's no time limit on that process, but I'm just not there yet.
A moment when that gun is sold and transfers is the moment to intervene and make sure that person does not have a record. And the way we do that is with a 90-second background check. It is the most commonly done thing, but it's not done for all gun sales. I think most people in America think we already do this on all gun sales and are frankly shocked to learn this is not something that's standard.
You know, we are club members that no one wants to join, but I think there's a purpose here. I think we're all singing off the same sheet of music, and we're going to get something done. And we are going to do whatever it takes.
After my daughter was murdered 2 weeks ago, I said on national television that we have to do whatever it takes to fix this problem. Whatever it takes to fix this problem. I know that weakening the stranglehold on the gun lobby is not going to happen overnight. I know too that passing background checks won't prevent all acts of gun violence from taking place. We can't stop now. We must continue to mount pressure on our elected officials here in Washington and at home in your home state. The overwhelming majority of Americans agree with common sense reforms, but too many members of Congress remain in the pocket of the gun lobby, and that has got to change. Folks, that's what it's going to take to bring about change. Keeping the pressure on our lawmakers until they do the right thing. It's just doing the right thing. And if they won't, we will find their replacement.
A towering construction crane toppled over on Friday during a violent rainstorm in the Saudi city of Mecca, Islam's holiest site. The crane crashing into the Grand Mosque, killing over 100 people ahead of the start of the annual Hajj pilgrimage later this month. Images posted by social media users showed a grisly scene. Police and onlookers attending to numerous bodies lying amid pools of blood on the polished mosque floor. Ambulances whisking the wounded to area hospitals. As of late Friday, Saudi Arabia's civil defense authority said those injured in the disaster numbered at least 200. Authorities did not provide details on the victims' nationalities, but it was likely that the tragedy will touch several countries. The Grand Mosque and the cube-shaped Kaaba within it draw Muslims of all types from around the world throughout the year. The numbers increase significantly in the run-up to the Hajj. Performing the pilgrimage once during one's lifetime is a duty for all able-bodied adult Muslims. This year's pilgrimage is expected to start around September 22nd.
Severe floods have hit Japan, sending tons of radiation-contaminated water from the Fukushima nuclear plant into the ocean. That's been confirmed by the facility's operator, Tokyo Electric Power. Authorities have declared the situation an emergency. Entire neighbourhoods were submerged in water after rivers burst their banks. Around 90,000 people have been moved to safety. Professor Christopher Busby, who's the scientific secretary of the European Committee on Radiation Risks, says that there could be serious radiation-related consequences if the situation is not handled properly.
12 people have died and millions are suffering with respiratory problems after a severe sandstorm swept through the Middle East. Environmental experts warned on Wednesday that climate change is affecting the frequency and scale of sandstorms in the region. The sandstorm, which entered its third day on Wednesday, caused the deaths of 4 people in Lebanon, while sending as many as 2,000 to hospitals due to breathing problems. It also hit Syria, Jordan, Israel, the West Bank, Gaza, and Egypt. The sandstorm began in Syria on Sunday and killed 6 people in the central province of Hama Tuesday while causing asphyxiation and breathing problems. In Jordan, experts recommended people stay indoors and wear masks soaked in water if they needed to venture outside. Temperatures in Amman on Wednesday rose to 39 degrees Celsius.
There's an awful lot of good people out there that are all messed up in what you call eschatology, but it doesn't keep them out of heaven. What keeps you out of heaven is getting messed up on Christ, not eschatology. Get the sun right and it'll be okay with the rest of it. Get the sun wrong and nothing else matters. He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no man cometh unto the Father but by me. So the book of Revelation opens to us the future. We've got a future. They don't have a future. They've got a hole in the ground. They go back die like a dog, die like an animal. They live a hedonistic life. They have no purpose in life. They're Darwinian. They're agnostic. They're evolutionists. They're atheists. My, what a miserable, sick existence. But me, oh, listen to me, folks. We know whom we have believed. And we've got a home in heaven. And I don't know of anything that'd be greater tonight to walk out of this house and say, Lord Jesus, I've been wasting my life. I've been living for the flesh and living for the here and living for the now. I want that blessed hope to boil up in my soul and set me on fire. And you know what that blessed hope is? The Bible said, looking for that blessed hope and glorious appearing of our great God and Savior. The blessed hope is the blessed hope inside you that not you're saved, that you're going to be saved. It's not hope and salvation. It's hoping for the appearing of the Lord Jesus Christ, that it could come at any moment. So the book of Revelation is the apocalypsis. As I've said to you time and time and time and time again, it is the unfolding, the unveiling. It is the pulling back of the curtain to show you the future, to show you eternity. And it goes into eternity. The last chapter and the last verse in the book of Revelation, 22 chapters. And here's what it says. Listen to this. I, Jesus, verse 16, have sent mine angel to testify to you the things in the churches. I am the root and the offspring of David, and the bright and morning star. And the Spirit and the bride say, come. And let him that heareth say, come. And let them that is athirst come. And whosoever will, let him take the water of life freely. Isn't that wonderful? You take a book right here that took 2,000 years to write. It's a remarkable, remarkable thing that the last few words in the Bible give you an invitation. Come. Here, it's yours. You want the water of life? Come and drink it. Are you hungry? He's the bread of life. Are you lost? He's the Savior. And it's yours. It's mine. It's for anybody that wants that. Then he continues on and he said,